Rule number one, don't open the door.
I need a little more up top and a little less down below.
Amber alert. Oh God, something's going to happen, something's going to happen, something's going to happen. In orbit of Uranus,
It smells.
I don't even want to talk about it.
Oh, no, you love me. You know you love me.
Just don't let it touch the
You know, that's great, but give me a little more.
Why are you shooting at me?
You can't start the car. Johnny has the keys.
Hello, hello, hello out there in YouTube and podcast land. You have reached Johnny Has the Keys, where we talk about horror movies and science fiction films and those key elements that lift and separate them from the average genre fare. Are you new to us? Well, we would like to welcome you to our final episode of the season. Why are you joining so late?
What?
David and I are old friends. We talk about horror movies and science fiction movies. We've been doing this for probably our lifetime, or at least our lifetime shy the first 10 years.
Yeah, probably.
And now we're doing it for the masses. We've been doing this podcast for going on 5 years. We're in the end of our 6th season, and we'd like to thank you if you're coming back to see us again. Welcome newcomers. Welcome people coming back. David Horton is my co-host and good friend. David, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm happy and sad, which it always happens at the end of the season. I'm glad we're doing the movie we're doing, but I'm sad that it's the last one and we'll have to wait until next season to start doing it again. But I'm sure we'll Patreon and do some other stuff in the interim.
I just realized that for the folks out there that don't realize this, especially if you're a little bit younger, TV seasons used to run from the fall to the late spring, early fall, late spring. And that's exactly how we do our show because we're old geezers.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's the way school works, too. You don't go
it's
to
like school year.
Summer.
There you go.
So, yeah, think about it that way rather than old geezer way. But normally we try to start with what we've been doing in our genre-related week. What in the past week between episodes have we done that's very close to our genres, mine being science fiction. We just, on our Patreon, we do the Dilithium Chamber, which is a podcast it's a YouTube channel that's devoted to classic Star Trek. And in one of the episodes we just finished, we talked about other iterations of Star Trek, like Next Generation and Deep Space Nine and all of that. And it inspired me, and I went back and looked at some episodes from Enterprise, which is a series that I like that not a lot of Star Trek fans do. I don't know why, and I especially don't know why those same fans would like Discovery, but anyway, that's a different topic. So I went back and looked at some, like 4 episodes. I looked at watched the pilot again, which is a really cool Star Trek pilot, by the way. Just saying, it's worth it. And I think if you watch it, you'll be interested in it because I know you haven't seen that series. However, just to always skip through the credit sequence because the theme song sucks. But
isn't it some lady singing or something?
Yeah, it's Diane Warren. Diane
Warren's the songwriter, not the singer, I don't think.
But it is a female vocal.
Well, maybe she is a singer.
It's been a long road. And it's just not good. Anyway, ironic you say that because in the past, in the original series, it was just the ship cascading toward the camera. And then bringing the credits in. And in Next Generation, it was the ship again, but it's this big, majestic, like a cruise liner graphics approach to it. So it looks majestic and wonderful flying over us. And one of the best is Voyager, which is the Voyager ship itself encountering all these space things where it's a nebula. They go over the rings of a ringed moon and they reflect on the ice crystals. So it's a really great graphic. This one is the history of the sailing ship Enterprise. So it goes from like a bamboo Native Americans doing like on an outrigger. It's all about exploration ships
Right.
until it gets to the Enterprise, and then it goes into the future, and then it goes into the different, and then it goes into the NX-1, which is the Enterprise design for Enterprise. But it's been a long road music. Anyway, I say that to say I then jumped to season 4 and watched the 2-part episode called In a Mirror Darkly, which is their version of the Mirror universe.
Oh.
And they have a teaser. The teaser is really good. I'm not going to tell you anything because you don't even know the characters, so you wouldn't care. But the teaser ends with a typical Star Trek, oh my gosh, we're in this other universe. We don't understand. Our characters are now thrust, just like in the original series. Suddenly the characters are thrust in the Mirror universe. The credit sequence starts and it's in the Mirror universe. It's a totally different song, and it's all about military uprisings and conquering and
That's
destroying
awesome.
planets. And
Yeah,
I went,
that's great.
I would love to watch this whole series. Why don't you do this?
Hey, Scott Bakula, we need you.
Yeah. And there are people that really didn't like him as a captain. And I thought he was a really good captain in the Star Trek universe, so to speak.
Yeah.
And
I've
I just
always
saw
liked him.
recently announced too that they're going to do Starfleet Academy. So they're going to do
Kids.
Starfleet. They're going to do Star Trek Junior, I guess. So that's going to not make me happy, but who cares?
It's
You know.
Paramount
Anyway.
listening to Disney,
Yeah, yes.
basically. If Marvel can do it, so can Star Trek. Yeah.
Right. And so that's what I did, but I really enjoyed it. I really recommend it to people who are Star Trek fans. And if you are a Star Trek fan, you should be a Patreon or patron with us on Patreon. Tim keeps correcting me on my verbiage.
On your verbiage.
But that's what I did in my interim.
Well, this was actually not a Shudder film. I can't remember what I watched this on. This is
Okay.
another one of those 2013 movies that I watched when we were doing research for the top 5 2013. And this was a little movie called The Harvest. I had never heard of this. It doesn't really turn into a horror movie for a long time, but the very last act is a horror movie.
Okay.
It got my attention because it was directed by John McNaughton. Does that name sound familiar to you?
Yeah, but I'm not sure why. What has he done?
He directed Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. And he also directed Wild Things, which was that Nev Campbell Richardson. Was it Denise Richards? I think was in that movie. Yeah,
and Kevin Bacon.
That's why you know John McNaughton, because of those women, I'm sure.
Well, that's a good reason. But also Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, everyone should watch once just to never have to watch it again.
Oh, we'll do it on the podcast. I'll reintroduce it to you.
Oh my gosh, that movie scarred me for life.
Anyway, this one stars some really great people. It has Samantha Morton, who is forever going to be typecast as a villain in my book because she played Alpha on The Walking Dead. But it also stars Michael Shannon, and I think you remember me talking to you about him playing George Jones in the George and Tammy miniseries.
Well,
He's
and I
just
like him in everything I see him. He's really good.
He is, and he actually does a lot of genre stuff, just stuff I haven't seen yet. It's like stuff that's on my list. And then it stars Natasha Callis and Charlie Tahan, who is another big familiar face to me. I knew him from Ozark, but he was also in that movie I've mentioned several times on here called Super Dark Times.
Okay.
And then it also stars Peter Fonda.
Oh,
So there's a lot of good people in this.
yeah.
Synopsis is a physician who keeps her dying son completely secluded becomes unhinged when she learns that her new neighbor has secretly befriended the boys. So there's this girl a few houses. Well, their houses are not close together, but they're probably next door. And she starts coming over and coming in the boy's window and hanging out with him because he's sickly and can't really leave his bedroom. And the mother doesn't like that at all.
Okay. Probably not.
It only gets a 72% on Rotten Tomatoes. I would say that's pretty close to being accurate because there are some plausibility issues with this movie. However, the acting is very strong, so I would recommend give it a view. So that's
Okay.
what I did in my genre week.
Michael Shannon. I remember him because he was the bad guy in Shape of Water,
Yes, he was.
and he was in the other one. I remembered him from was he's
think
another
he's-
bad guy. He makes a good bad guy. He's in Man of Steel. He's Zod.
Oh, I haven't
General
seen
Zod.
that in so long.
Yeah.
I cannot remember the name of this movie. I want to say it's apocalyptic, and I haven't seen it. But he did like a sci-fi movie with Jessica Chastain as well. He did George and Tammy with her, but before he did that, he had done another movie. That's how they knew each other.
Huh. Okay.
Because I think Chastain may have been one of the producers on George and Tammy. I can't remember. And she wanted to work with him again because they had done a genre piece together. So, and it's on my list to watch. It'll show up sometime, I'm sure.
All right. Makes sense.
Yeah. So
I can't segue out of
I've
the
deserted
house
you
into the, yeah. So let's eat some dessert and go. No, I'm excited about today because
it's our season finale.
it's our season finale. It's, in my opinion, a really incredible film. And a few months ago, the sequel came out and blew everything away too. So that's a good thing. Doing Dune. And according to my research, I think when we've done this director before, we did him for Arrival, correct? And we did Blade Runner 49. And we were struggling with his pronunciation. And
You were, I'm not.
well, according to everything I've listened to recently, it's Denis Villeneuve. That's it. You don't pronounce the end of it.
That
It's
sounds
just
like it's
Villeneuve.
French.
Well, I'm just saying that's what everybody pronounces. How they pronounce his name.
Denis, I may have been mispronouncing because my husband's name's Dennis, but his last name in a Hispanic pronunciation would be Villanueva, and you would say Bay, not Ve, because that's how the
Right.
Spanish pronunciation. But Denis makes sense because I's in Spanish are pronounced E.
Well,
So
and I
Denis.
think he's French anyway. He has
Oh,
a
well,
French
maybe he is,
accent.
but that last name is very Spanish. So maybe,
maybe
he's got
he is-
dual parentage.
He might, something like that. So anyway, we've covered him before. We've covered 2 other films of his, but we are doing Dune, the part 1. So don't confuse it with part 2. And if you happened upon this site to listen to part 2, we're not going to do part 2. We're just doing part 1 of Dune, which came out in 2013, wasn't it? No, 21. Sorry,
2021.
You said 13 earlier. That's why. 2021.
David is time traveling.
Yes. Denis also helped write it with Eric Roth and John Spaths. It's produced by Warner Brothers. And had you seen this version before? Because we've also covered the Lynch version on the
We
podcast.
covered the Lynch version a few seasons back.
Yeah.
And I had not seen this. I watched this for the first time. I actually recorded it on a DVR months ago, waiting to watch it before we did this episode. So it was my first time. Yeah.
And you had not read the book, correct? You
I have
not
never read this book.
novels.
No.
Okay. Well, what was your reaction to Dune?
I think I really liked it. I think the visuals are just superb, but then we already knew that from the director, from Denis' prior films, which we covered, Arrival and Blade Runner 2049. I have a few issues with it, but the issues I have are the issues that most people, I think, would have with an epic science fiction film. I mean, I guess that the main one being it probably requires multiple viewing for full understanding. That, or like doing what I did and going back and rereading a synopsis of it. It's not just science fiction, but I have similar problems with shows like Game of Thrones, where it's so broad and there's so many names that are unusual and there's so many families or clans or races that are hard to distinguish because they look very similar. That would be my main gripe, but I think that's a universal gripe about heavy science fiction in general. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And fantasy as well. The same thing is true with Tolkien.
Or Lord of the Rings.
Same thing
Yeah,
is
exactly.
true with Wheel of Time. All of these epic things. And I think Game of Thrones is a very great key, and I've got it several times in my keys and everything too, just because it's the closest contemporary viewership of a story of this scale, with all these different houses, with all these different things. And you are just thrown into it.
I like that.
There's not a huge prologue of, and in this time, this happened, and this was the world it's suddenly, boom, we're there.
And didn't Lynch do a crawl?
Oh, yeah. There was a huge prologue that was narrated by Virginia Madsen, who was the Emperor's daughter in the original. And you won't see her until part 2, the way he's divided this story up. But yeah, I can empathize with your frustration at that.
I don't know that it's frustration. It's just that the way I appreciate it for an initial viewing was more visually than the actual story itself.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Well,
I had to let some stuff flow over me, or I would just get lost in it. In my opinion, this is an incredible film. Mm-hmm. This is a film that celebrates film. So to me, this is along the epics of anything by David Lean, Dr. Zhivago, Gone with the Wind, any of these major visually compelling, incredibly cinematic stories. I mean, it's really like every single shot, he said, we're going to make this the best shot ever created. Yeah, which is what filmmakers should do.
Yeah, and he does. And we talked about his artistry and his creativity in the other 2 films we've covered, but it so shows. And in the production of this, certain things came up when I was doing research on the production and was just going, oh my gosh. Because when the novel came out in 1965, of course, people were interested in, can we turn this into a movie? And people said, no, you can never film this because it's too huge. It's too big. There's too much going on. You'll never be able to do it in a movie.
I think they said the same thing about Gone with the Wind when it came out. Yeah.
Dr. Zhivago, Bridge on the River Kwai, Lawrence of Arabia, all of them. So Lynch's original cut of it was 3.5 hours long. And they cut it down to, what did we say, 139, 137?
137, I think, yeah.
And it showed, of course, but his approach was totally different. One of the things that I like in the differences was Denis said that he didn't want to do the telepathy a lot. So there wouldn't be these huge, massive, there would be the voice, so you would be able to communicate with each other, but there wouldn't be these introspective monologues like Lynch had, where Paul is talking about his dreams or thinking to himself while it's just showing a close-up of him. So you wouldn't do any of that, which is good. I'm glad that was a choice he made. But this was a destiny project. Villeneuve said that he had wanted to do this movie since he first read it as a teenager. And he really fought to try to get it and do it and produce it and direct it. And it shows. It also is destiny because when Warner released it, they only really had the money to do one movie. And they said, if it doesn't make money or do good or whatever, we're not doing the sequel. We're not doing a part 2. And luckily it did. And so now there is a part 2.
I read that it was 2 things. First, I just looked up Denis, and he's French Canadian. And I don't really see much about his parents, but when I look at their names, it does look like one of them could be French Canadian and one may be Spanish. I don't know. Or of Spanish descent, which would make sense. And the pronunciation would be a French pronunciation if he's from Canada, I'm sure.
Yeah.
The other thing I was going to say is that the model for this film production was the movie It, which we covered last season, was it? Or no, it was earlier this season. Yeah.
Yeah, because we did it
over Christmas. And that was the one where they said, okay, I'm going to do the first film, and based upon the popularity of it, I'll get the rights to do the second one, or the money to do the second one.
But it essentially ends. You could watch It, part 1, and never have watched part 2 and still be satisfied. It's a good movie. This, no.
No, it kind of stops.
This is one of my, we'll get to the keys, but this is definitely and we're over? What? Okay, great, I guess. Sure. We normally try to start with like scenes, or there's scenes that jumped out at you or that
Like I said, this is a visual movie, so there's tons of scenes that jump out at me. Naturally, the one that's going to jump out at me and most is the monster scene, which is the sandworm.
Oh, yeah.
Which a lot of people don't even know what Dune is about, but they know what sandworms are because that was always the talk about either the book or the movies that have existed, those giant sandworms.
I guess I didn't do a synopsis real quick. So
okay, go ahead.
For those of you who don't know.
Yeah, go ahead. Let's see you synopsize this bitch.
This is a massive story, but it is told from the perspective of Paul, who is the heir to a noble house. Basically, there's a lot of politics to it, as Tim said. There's a lot of backstory and history and everything else. But this is set in the distant future with humans. A lot of people don't understand that Dune has no aliens. This is all humans. And this is the humans after their expansion into space, and they've broken up into these different ruling houses, which are on separate planets. And we follow the story of Paul Atreides and his family as they are commissioned by the reigning ruler at the time, the emperor, to go and be the supervisors, to give them their own fiefdom on Arrakis, which is a desert planet where spice was discovered. Spice is a really great thing because it does so much for the entire galaxy, but the most important thing it does is it allows for interstellar travel, which we didn't get to in this movie at all, but we'll get to probably in part 2. So without spice, these planets would never be able to have travel between them. So spice becomes the most important element in the entire galaxy. The Atreides family is ordered to protect it, take care of it, and everything else. Little do they know that they're actually being set up to be attacked and eliminated and destroyed by the Harkonnens. In addition to all of that, Paul is thrust into the Arakian culture, meaning there's an entire civilization of rebels on Arrakis who are the Fremen, and Paul is thrust into their world. And there's also other stuff like the Bene Gesserit and lots of other things that go into it. But we follow Paul as he slowly becomes that epic little farm boy who has a destiny that he didn't even know he had, but he finds out and goes through his hero journey to become the Messiah. So that's it. I'm sorry to interrupt the scenes. We were at sandworms.
Well, no, sandworms would be one scene that definitely comes to mind. You mentioned that they're all humans, but I mean, the Harkonnens strike me as somewhat alien in their appearance.
That's because they've done that to themselves. You'll find out. And you found out a lot of it in Lynch's version, did that a lot better with them showing them do these operations on themselves and installing zippers and stuff and weird body horror. But the Harkonnens are still human, even though they are odd looking and do that to themselves, shave their heads, go around overweight and strange.
Well, I was going to say another scene that pops into my head is because Stellan Skarsgård is one of my favorite actors that's in this film. And when he plays the Baron in that weird, like, mud bath or whatever the fuck it is, for some reason that scene sticks out in my head. It's like, is he just bathing in spice because he's addicted? What the hell? I don't know what it is he's bathing in.
Are you talking about in his first appearance or in his after he's been hurt?
Maybe it's after he's been hurt and that's like a healing chamber or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, even the nurse essentially that's with him even says she's talking to Raban and she says he hasn't finished the healing cycle yet.
Okay.
And so that's why he's immersed in that to heal himself. Yeah.
Right. Okay. I just remembered a key. Sorry. Go ahead. But those are the two scenes that pop out to me immediately. Anything with actors I like in it. I mean, I love the scene where he does the practice fight with Josh Brolin's character. That's pretty cool. Anything with Javier Bardem is great.
Oh, Stilgar, yeah.
And I'm actually impressed with two of the lesser actors, and pardon me, anyone that are fans, but you've got Jason Momoa and Drax. What's his name that plays Drax?
Baptista.
Baptista. You've got two very athletic or former athletic actors in these roles, and I was really surprised by how good they are in both those roles.
Yes. I think they're the best roles they've done, each of them respectively.
Well, I like Drax
as
better, but
Momoa as Duncan Idaho is really good because he gives him such a genuine warmth for Paul and Lady Jessica. And even though he's obviously one of the best fighters in the galaxy, he's got a sense of humor about him. He plays him almost like The Rock has done in a couple of films, where he's the big imposing guy, but he's got a nice heart, you can tell, and he's smiling and all that. And I think Dave Bautista as Raban, that's a hard character to do because he's basically
a henchman.
Yeah, he's the nephew of the Baron, but he's mostly a subgeneral. Is the character arc that he does.
And am I wrong, or is that the Sting character from the?
No, we didn't see this. Sting plays Fuad Revad, and he's not in this.
Okay,
part one. He will be in part two, I'm sure, because it's a very important plot point that he has a fight with Paul.
Okay,
so that will happen. But Raban is like his chief general enforcer. It's interesting you said that because he is a parallel of Duncan Idaho, even though Duncan's more of a covert ops guy, and Duncan was horribly miscast in Lynch's version because that was Patrick Stewart. That's who played Duncan Idaho.
Oh yeah, no, I wasn't. I wasn't asking if Sting was the Duncan Idaho character. I was thinking Sting may be the Baptista
Raban,
character. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, but that's a different one.
It's a different character.
But yeah, both of them, I agree with you. Both of them are really good in this. Another scene that I do like the hunter killer scene. I think that's really well told with the little needle, the floating assassin needle that Paul, he senses it in the room and everything. It's a really good scene. Thing with the Bene Gesserit.
With who?
The Bene Gesserit, the females.
Well, that's what I was getting to. The scene where he puts his hand in the box. That one sticks out too.
Oh yeah,
that's a great scene
and so iconic from Dune the novel all the way through all the versions, everything else, because it's Paul's test of manhood. And she's totally right, and it's a little bit more involved in the novel. But had he failed, she would have killed him instantly right then, because he's not worth living. They've been plotting this for centuries. And if he's going to be a part of it, then he needs to play their game.
It's funny that you said it was a test of manhood, because it's really a test of sisterhood. He was supposed to be female.
Well said.
Yeah.
Yes, well said. Well put. Correct me on that one. That's true. It's like you said, there's a lot of, I also like, there's so much about this movie I like. I like the scene with Paul and Duke Leto on Caladan. Really, they're only seen together when Leto has been visiting his father's grave, and Paul comes up to him saying, I want to go with Duncan to Arrakis early. And he goes, no, you'll go with us in a couple of months and all that. And he's going, no, but I want to go and everything. I don't care. You can't go. You have to fill in for me. In fact, I'd rather you come and join my councils and learn how I do stuff, because your ascension is more important than you going to Arrakis. You're too valuable. And I like the way Oscar Isaacs plays Leto, because he's very doomed from the very beginning, but he's not a haunted Dune. He's very respectable about he's accepted his destiny.
Exactly. He respects his piece in the puzzle, the overall thing.
Yeah. And I don't think he's surprised at all that there's going to be some bad stuff that happens. I do think he's surprised by the traitor and the treachery, but I don't think he's surprised at all about the fact that they are being manipulated by the Emperor. So, and literally, like I said, every scene in this, from the even the fight with the Fremen that Paul has to do is so well filmed and well shot. But I love the grandioseness of everything else in this production design.
Yeah, like I said, the visuals are amazing.
And they're huge. These crafts are huge. These buildings are huge. And it's just so cool and vast and big. So I like that. And I agree with you. I do think it's a lot of information thrown at you, but I do think the design elements they do help you distinguish a little bit more. The only thing I think they screwed up in, and I've got some notes when it comes to production notes, but the only thing I think they screwed up in is the Shadukar, which is the Imperial Guard, the ones in white. Their uniforms, their armor that they wear, look a lot like the Harkonnen armor.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I can't tell the Harkonnens apart from the Shadukar. I know they're in cahoots together, but to me, it was really hard to distinguish them.
Yeah. And I would have preferred even something different with their helmets. I mean, I understand that you have the basic things of armor all the time. You have chest plates and armor, helmets and stuff like that. It's like if you watch a World War II movie, the helmets are what help us distinguish the Germans from the Americans.
Very much so.
The Europeans. So that some difference. And there are differences. The Harkonnens have a more of a plate that goes in front of their mouths, as opposed to the Shadukar have an open visor look, but they're so similar that it's hard to tell them. And then one of those dreams, Paul has a dream of the Fremen fighting the Shadukar, and the Fremen, I mean, they look the same. They look almost like the same uniform
because they look like Lawrence of Arabia. They're all in their turbans and their long cloaks or whatever. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but this is in his dream when they're all in the armor. They're not in the cloaks anymore. They're in the armor.
Okay, gotcha.
But I think differentiating the houses, I mean, Caladan, we could tell is a water planet and is very Irish looking and very Ireland, Scotland, that whole feel to it. Of course, Arrakis is desert everywhere, desert and rocks. That's all you get, desert and rocks and 20 palm trees that they try to keep alive. And, and Getty Prime is industrialized and dark and black and foreboding and all of that, which is where the Harkonnens are from. So the only other one we see is, Secundus. Anyway, I can't remember the name, but it's the home planet of the Shadukar. And it's raining and dark and open. It's Seattle.
Okay. We have Seattle, Ireland, the Mojave Desert,
and downtown New York. Yeah. Yeah. So that should be but
all right, we did some scenes.
Yeah.
Do you want to do some production stuff before we go into casting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure. So there have been two previous visual versions of Dune. One was David Lynch's, of course, and then there was also a sci-fi miniseries, like a 3-part, that is a little bit closer to the book, but it's a sci-fi budget, so nowhere near as grandiose as either of the two cinematic
Is it really closer to the book? I would think this is probably a great adaptation of it.
This is a great adaptation, but that one covers, the 3 episodes covers the entire book. This movie only covers like the first half of the book.
I mean, from what I read, it covers.
Yeah, it's essentially when Paul is accepted by the Fremen. So it's before any of the changes happen. We didn't get into the weirding way and everything else that we'll get into in part 2. So all that's in the miniseries. So it's a little bit more dedicated to.
And I was going to ask you if you had seen part 2 yet.
I have not.
Okay.
I'm not. I hope to. But some production things that I liked about it that I think should be called out. The set design for Dune is by Patrice Vermette. And I'm not sure if that's male or female Patrice, because he or she is French. But they're quoted as saying it was vital that all of the settings for the movie be realistic. So nothing was done with CGI, nothing was done with green screen, nothing was done with extended sets. They built all the sets. So even though it's this huge hallway that looks like it's a football field long and everything else, they built that and built it for the realism that they wanted. They used a lot of Egyptian design, a lot of Mayan influence, and a lot of World War II bunkers That's what he said. He patterned Arrakis. Arrakeen is the name of the city on Arrakis, where the Atreides take over. And it does have a bunker feel. The walls are incredibly thick and big and wide, and there's lots of steps and huge platforms and all of that. So it was very interesting. Costume design is by Jacqueline West and Bob Morgan. They said that they used medieval influence since there's such an influence on houses and the difference in the houses. They wanted to go for like medieval pageantry. And since there's not a lot of banners being used as far as heralds or stuff like that they can do, they had to use different, she said, subtextual things to give the influence. So like House Atreides, she said she was inspired by the Knights Templar because the Knights Templar were betrayed by the church and killed. And the Romanovs, like this dying empire, feel they're still royal, they're still regal, but they're all in dark. So that's why the Atreides look like pseudo-Nazi. I mean, they've got that, everything is a dark uniform look to them. She said her inspirations for the Bene Gesserit were tarot cards and chess pieces.
That makes sense.
I thought that's really interesting and especially the way Denis films them, with them being all in like shadowy and all thin and lean and walking really slowly and stuff. Yeah. She said that both she and Morgan took huge inspiration from Lawrence of Arabia, no surprise, Dr. Zhivago, and Fahrenheit 451.
The original one, Truffaut's?
Yep.
Interesting. Another French.
And you see it in those collars that are the Nehru collar look for the Atreides and all that. So I thought that was interesting. And then my last costuming trivia bit was they had to create over 250 still suits for the movie. All the Harkonnens, all the Atreides, all the Fremen had still suits, which is the particular armor suit they wear that allows them to save their body water. Okay. Production was divided in 3 areas. Basically, most of the interiors were done in Budapest. Most of the exteriors were filmed in Jordan. And some of the special effects work was done in Canada.
I read Abu Dhabi too, somewhere.
Yeah, they did some exterior work in Abu Dhabi. You're correct. You've got the sandworm in your picture there. They spent a year developing the sandworms and how they move, how they look, how they're designed, how they're built. Because Denis said, if we are going to CGI them, which we have to, they must be realistic. If there's even a moment or a second where they look fake, it will not work. They have to be as tangible and real as the rest of the environment.
I'm assuming when they close their mouth, they're a little more aerodynamic than that. Because that's not
they would have to be.
Yeah, it's not a point. It's a big flat surface.
Well, and you see one in the very end, like next to last shot of the movie, they're watching the one and a rider on him. And you see that his snout is pointed.
Okay.
The other thing they don't get to is the reason that melange is the name of the spice, even though they never say melange in this movie yet, is made by the worms. Like gardens are fertilized by earthworms and stuff. That's the same way the spice is produced. So without the worms, you would not, because later on people said, well, why don't you just kill off all the sandworms? And that way you don't have to worry about them and protect yourselves. Well, because they actually make the spice, so we have to let them.
Yeah, it's their poop.
But
and like any other human, they're going to go to a planet and exploit its natural resources.
Welcome to Colonization 101. Right. And the only other few little bitty production notes I have are the ornithopters, which is a really cool design. Denis was adamant that he wanted to use natural sunlight with them, so they built them. The ornithopters themselves are actual practical, weighing like almost 1.5 tons each vehicles. The wings are CGI when they're extended. But to film them, they created this really cool thing, which was a gimbal that picked up and dangled the ornithopter prop with actors in it and everything. but underneath it, it had a 360-degree thing that they called the dog collar, which was painted like the desert, so that it reflected light back up because Denis wanted to use natural sunlight through the windows and through everything else. So they would go up way up on this area of the studio or the back lot and hang these things so they could do the shots of them and surround them in this big collar of desert colored fabric so that they looked like they were hovering and realistic. I thought that was really interesting way.
It is. That seems like a lot of expense for not using lighting, just regular lighting.
And yet this movie was less expensive than Mission Impossible.
That's because Tom Cruise's salary.
It could be. Yeah,
it is. I guarantee it.
Oh, but look at the stars in this. Look at the people you have in this.
It does have a lot of good stars, but I mean, I don't know how they got paid. Some of them may have just been loyal because they're fans of the book. I mean, that's how that works sometimes.
Yeah. I also read that a lot of your, like to your saying, not the lesser, but the other characters in it, Dave Bautista, Josh Brolin, Jason Momoa, and one other one I read about, all four of them accepted the role without reading the script.
Well, yeah. I mean,
as
just
soon
the
as
words
Denis Villeneuve
Dune
said,
and Denis Villeneuve, I mean, I would think would sell it.
Yeah.
Because he's already established him. We talk a lot about horror movie directors that are emerging in the 21st century as very similarly to the way they did in the 80s. I mean, this Denis Villeneuve is an epic sci-fi director. I mean, he has got now 4 huge, very well-respected science fiction films under his belt.
Yes, he is incredibly good. Oh, Javier Bardem auditioned for Duncan.
Yeah.
And then when he read the script and they said they gave him the part of Stilgar, he went, okay, yeah, I can do that. Which is great because Stilgar is a better character than Duncan overall.
Well, and Javier is probably, no offense to, what's his face? Aquaman.
Jason Momoa.
Momoa. I would say that Javier is a much better actor.
Oh, that scene, we talk about it all the time. Be really aware of your introduction into the movie. It's so important for how your character is introduced. And the fact that they hear about him ahead, they don't even know his name. They say the head of the Fremen is here and he refuses to give up his knife. And Duncan says, well, it's his crysknife. It's sacred to them. And Leto goes, okay. And the way he just walks in, past the guards, everything else, walks right up to the table, looks at them for a few minutes, and then spits. You go, yeah, that's a great entrance.
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
Yeah.
I have a few tidbits of trivia as far as production that you may not have put in your notes. The Eric Roth, who was one of the writers with John Spates, did Prometheus and Doctor Strange. And then Eric Roth was known for Forrest Gump's and Killer of the Flower Moon, which is something we were talking about prior to this recording. And then, of course, Frank Herbert, who wrote the book. Anyway, Roth, one of the writers, was one of the victims of the Bernie Madoff Ponzi schemes. Did you know that?
I did not.
He lost his entire retirement fund, wiped out.
Wow.
But he, as a youngster, attended UCLA Film School with a young man named Jim Morrison, who was his friend. So this Eric Roth guy that wrote this movie was friends with the singer of The Doors, Jim Morrison. I just found that fascinating because he did go to film school, Jim Morrison did, and ended up being a musician. As far as music, speaking of music, composer Hans Zimmer was such a big fan of Dune that he turned down working with Christopher Nolan on Tenet to do this film. And for very similar reasons, Denis Villeneuve was top choice, but turned down the film No Time to Die, the Bond film,
James
to
Bond.
do this film. So you had people that, like I said, it may not always be money. It's loyalty to the project that gets a lot of these people involved.
Agreed. And the vision and everything else. I mean, it's like, oh, you've got this movie, or Steven Spielberg would like you to do his movie. What are you going to pick?
And we
I don't
just
have to
talked
think.
about that. Was it last week that somebody turned down Spielberg to be in something? I can't remember what it was. It was in a movie we've done recently, though.
It was
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Speaking of music for a second, so I'm not a huge Hans Zimmer fan. I know a lot of people are, and I'm sure I'll get comments about that and emails and stuff. I've
Shame on
liked, if you look up Zimmer, he's got almost 170 movies that he scored.
He's like John
And you-
Williams.
Right.
As
But
far as
John Williams, I can
his
hum
productions.
and relate to about 75 of those thematically. And you can't with Zimmer. I mean, most people know Pirates and know that soundtrack. Everybody talks about Interstellar, yet Interstellar, although a adequate soundtrack, is not memorable, in my opinion, in any way. Neither is Inception, except for one song in it that he actually took from a classical piece. So I'm not a big Hans Zimmer fan for scoring. However, I love this soundtrack.
Yeah, it's
And
great.
again, you're not going to hum this song, but every scene in this that has music is so perfectly scored. The music beats are perfect. The instrumentation he created for it works. It's amazingly good. His leitmotifs actually work in this as opposed to Interstellar, which I don't think they work in Interstellar. And it's just really, I listened to the soundtrack separately commuting the other day and just went, man, this is just some really powerful music and sound design in general. I don't know if it won. I'm sure you'll get to it with awards, but it deserved to win for sound design. The sound design in this is amazing.
Yeah, when we get to awards, I mean, we don't cover many movies that get Oscars, and this got a slew of them. So,
And it deserved them all
mhm.
and more, probably. But
Before I do that, do you want to go to cast, or did you have other production?
no, do your cast. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, obviously, it's an all-star cast, and I'm not going to go into the details of all of them. But the cast features one Oscar winner, which is Javier Bardem, and 3 Oscar nominees, including Josh Brolin, Timothée Chalamet, and Charlotte Rampling. Timothée Chalamet plays Paul Atreides. He is the main protagonist. We know him recently from playing Willy Wonka. I have not seen that. As a matter of fact, I have not seen many Timothée Chalamet movies.
Mhm.
I have not seen. Remember, I talked about a movie a while back called Bones and All.
Yeah.
He's like a cannibal on the road. I haven't seen that. And then the one he became famous with was Call Me by Your Name, which he did with Armie Hammer. And I have not seen that movie, though it has been recommended to me by several people.
Mm-hmm. I've heard it's really good. I've not seen it. I did see Wonka.
Oh, you did? What'd you think?
Mm-hmm. It's good.
Okay.
I'll cover it more in probably a genre sometime when we come back next season.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I was going to say, I think it's on our list now since we've expanded a bit. Rebecca Ferguson played Lady Jessica. I am not that familiar with her. She was in The Greatest Showman, which I'm sure you've seen, and I know she's in
also-
Silo.
She's in Silo. She's really
Yeah.
good in Silo. Yep. Mhm.
I don't know her very well, but I think she's fantastic. She's very captivating to me.
Well, I cannot believe you didn't mention somebody that one of her past roles.
Maybe I just
Picture
don't.
her. Picture
Huh.
her in a black hat in a hotel in Colorado.
Oh,
facing off.
she's in Doctor Sleep. Okay.
Yeah, she's
where
the
I know her
she's
from.
the head villain. She's the Rose the Mad Hat or whatever they call her, Rose the Hat,
Rose the Hat.
whatever. Yeah,
You're right.
Yeah.
I knew I recognized her, and I couldn't remember what it was from. Okay. That makes
Yeah.
perfect sense. I love her in
And
that film.
oh yes, she's awesome in that, and she's great in this. Actually,
Mhm.
her and Chalamet, all of their scenes together, even from the breakfast on, are great, and she is so good.
Yeah, they're like mother and son superhero duo.
Yeah. And the way
Kinda.
she's able to portray so much without saying anything, just visually with her eyes. She does that really well in Silo, too.
Mm.
There's a lot of unsaid stuff in the visual acting, and she's really good at that. Yeah, I think she's great.
Oscar Isaac is we know him from a movie we did several seasons back called Ex Machina. I know him recently from that show Moon Knight, that Marvel series, which I was not that crazy about that. Yeah.
Well, he's also Poe in the new Star Wars trilogy.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know much about that either.
We don't care about that either.
No.
So, yeah.
Jason Momoa plays Duncan Idaho. I know him from Aquaman. Do we know him from it? Well, he was on like that reboot of the David Hasselhoff show, wasn't he? Isn't that what he got famous with? The lifeguards on the beach thing?
I think so.
I think that's where he came from. I don't know if it was a reboot or the original. Probably a reboot because he's not that old.
Well, and he has an Apple TV series. I think it's called Blind or something like that, or Eyes or something where it's set in the future and everybody's blind. But his big thing was Khal Drogo in Game of Thrones.
See, I didn't see that. Okay.
That was his big deal. But yeah, he was, and again, he just plays the
good guy,
the Rock, the big brooding, hulking, primal sort of character.
He's the king's bodyguard, for lack of better. Actually, not the king. What is Paul? A duke?
Paul is a duke. Yeah. No. Leto is Duke Leto Atreides, and
Paul's the son, the heir, and he's Paul's bodyguard, basically.
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
he trains him too. He helps him with training.
Yes. Training is split between Duncan and Gurney Halleck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Moving on, Stellan Skarsgård plays Baron Vladimir Harkonnen. I can't say enough about Stellan Skarsgård. He's got supremely talented children, but that's because he is even more talented. I've liked him in pretty much anything I ever see him in.
Yeah.
The latest thing I've seen him in that I loved was Andor, the series that's on Disney Plus, which is a Star Wars series. But he's so popular. He's in other franchises, including the Thor movies, which are also the Avengers movies. Stellan is quite fertile. He has 8 children from 2 wives.
Dang.
And we only know of really 2, Bill and Alexander, who are like isn't it Bill and Alexander?
Yeah, it's True Blood and
Bill is he's Pennywise from It.
Yeah.
So he's got 2 supremely talented kids as well. Like I said, I can't say enough about him. Swedish actor, and
I saw that Denis said when he was doing the adaptation, he was picturing Stellan Skarsgård because he, as a person, genuinely scares him.
Really? Because, see, I think of him as very affable.
I do too. But this role, man, he is a monster in every scene.
Oh, yeah. Well, they also make him look like he's 120 pounds heavier or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's well done. Yep.
Some of these others I don't know, but I've got them in my cast list because they're high up on the list. Stephen McKinley Henderson plays Thufir Hawat.
Thufir. Thufir.
Thufir Hawat. He is he was in the movie Beau is Afraid, which is on my list because it's an Ari Aster movie, the guy that did Midsommar. I haven't seen it yet. Josh Brolin, Thanos himself.
Yep.
Who I recently watched on Saturday Night Live, and it's one of the best Saturday Night Lives I have seen in a long time. He is hilarious, but I never thought of him being a comedic actor. Anyway, he plays Gurney Halleck in this.
I was wrong earlier. Patrick Stewart plays Gurney Halleck in the David Lynch one.
Okay.
The Duncan one is Richard Jordan. Richard Jordan plays Duncan.
From Rich Man, Poor Man.
Yeah.
And isn't he in Logan's Run too?
Yep.
Yeah.
Runner.
Yeah, exactly. I started to say,
Josh,
Paul has like 4 guardians really. And one of them is Halleck. One of them is Duncan. One of them is the Asian man that ends up being a spy or a traitor, I guess you'd say.
That's Dr. Yui.
Right. And then there's one other that is like his I don't know what you would call them. They look out for him,
You've got Duncan, Gurney, and Huey, Dr. Huey, but you also have Thufir Howard. But Thufir is a mentat. Each house has an aide to the leader who is essentially their version of a computer. You notice there's no electronics in Dune other than the some of the gear that they use, but they don't use computers anywhere. You don't see a lot of computer stuff and all of that, and that's because they've essentially been outlawed.
Yeah.
But they genetically breed this particular race or this particular caste of humans, and they serve the purpose of computers. And you have one for Duke Leto, which is Thufir Hawat, and you have one for Baron Harkonnen, which I can't remember his name. Is Peter de Vries is his. Yeah.
Okay. Well, moving on, because like I said, there's a long list.
Oh, yeah.
Javier Bardem plays Stilgar. We know him, of course, as the villain from Skyfall, but I personally prefer watching him in No Country for Old Men, which is a Cormac McCarthy story. And, of course, we did a Cormac McCarthy story a few episodes back with The Road.
Yeah, with The Road.
And that is what I think he won an Oscar for. I didn't look that up, but I'm pretty sure that's what it was.
I'm pretty sure, too.
Yeah. Sharon Duncan Brewster plays Dr. Liet Kynes. Loved her. She's got a small but significant role. Mm-hmm. We know her from Rogue One, which I haven't seen in a long time, but I'm really wanting to rewatch. So that may be on our list and coming up next season.
Yeah.
Yeah. Chang Chen played Dr. Wellington Yu, who is that how you say it?
Yui.
You mentioned that. Dave Bautista, to me, this is not his best role. It's a good role, but I think his best role is Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy. I know you're not a fan, but he was also apparently in Blade Runner 2049. I don't remember that, but he was. And he's in Riddick, the sequel to Pitch Black. He played Glasu Robin Harkonnen, who is like the Baron's nephew or something, I think.
Well, and it'll be interesting to see how he is in part 2, because you get to meet Fade, which is his brother, and they have a little bit bigger roles, I guess, not more bigger, but different stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. David Dastmalchian, who just seems to be appearing in everything these days. I call him the male version of a Scream Queen because he's in a lot of horror movies, including the new Late Night with the Devil. He's also apparently one of Christopher Nolan's pet actors. He was in The Dark Knight. He was in Oppenheimer. He was also in that latest version of the Stephen King story, The Boogeyman. He plays Peter de Vries. He dies in this movie. Or de Vries.
He does. Yes. But he is the mentat to Baron Harkonnen.
Right.
So, yeah.
And he will not be in the sequel unless it's a flashback.
No.
Zendaya, who I always said Zendaya until I saw the Oscars the other night and they pronounced it Zendaya.
Okay.
Plays Chani. She is probably most known for being in the series Euphoria, which I have not seen, but I do recognize her as playing Mary Jane in the latest Spider-Man movies, which is a little unusual because Mary Jane's a redhead.
Speaking of a generational gap, I was unable to watch anything past the second episode of Euphoria. So,
okay. I heard it's got a lot of sex in it.
It's not just that. It's the culture. It's the modern high school culture. And it is horrible. Horrible.
Well, it's a very popular series.
Oh, yeah. And according to my daughters, very truthful. So sad, but true. This is nothing to write home to in this particular movie for Zendaya. She is the first narration we hear and everything else, and yet she has maybe, 10 minutes of screen time? So we don't really see a lot of her. I'm sure we will
see her next film, yeah.
Oh, yeah, because, of course, Paul has a relationship with her.
Right. So. There's like a, what do you call that? A love trio or whatever. I'm using the wrong wording. Yep.
No, I think it's just her and him.
When the lead has a love interest with two different people. I can't think of what that's called.
Who's his other love interest?
I thought it was the emperor's daughter. Didn't he try to marry one of the emperor's daughters to bring peace or whatever from Civil War?
You'll see.
I seem to. Wasn't it Virginia Madsen in the first movie?
Yes.
Okay. Well, maybe I just don't know what I'm talking about. I mentioned Oscar winner Charlotte Rampling plays the Reverend Mother, of course, in that very good scene with the hand in the box. Another familiar face is, and I'll never be able to pronounce this, Babs Usalamukum. I can't pronounce it. We know as Dr. Mbanga from the new iteration of Star Trek called Strange New Worlds. As soon as I saw him, I was like, "Oh yeah, know him." He plays.
Oh yeah, he plays Jamis.
Or Jamis, the one that has to battle Paul to the death for the Fremen ritual or whatever you call that. Benjamin Clementine played the Herald of Change. I'm getting into characters and people I don't know, so I'm going to stop there.
That's good.
Awards. This movie was nominated for 10 Academy Awards. It's very rare that we have a movie like that. I think King Kong was nominated for a few, and Jurassic Park this season are probably the only other two that we've covered.
Well, face it, both of our genres are not very popular with the Academy. No. Both of them are somewhat derided and looked down upon, and like they're not the same as Killers of the Flower Moon or whatever. So,
and they usually only, with the exception of Silence of the Lambs, they usually only garner production awards. And that's exactly what this movie won. 6 of them: sound, visual effects, production design, music, editing, and cinematography are the ones it won.
Yeah.
So
I don't know how he lost direction.
The ones that were probably not broadcast during the Oscars too, so we didn't hear about
probably that year.
Yeah. Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror, the Saturn Awards nominated it for 5: film, actor, Chalamet, costume, production, design, and makeup. It only won for makeup, so I should have looked up what beat it for those. I forgot to. Sorry about that. It was nominated for 11 BAFTAs and won 5, also productions, cinematography, score, production design, visual effects, and sound. This movie is currently not on the 1001 movies you must see before you die, but that's because it's only updated through the year 2020, and this movie came out in 2021. I have a feeling this movie will be on that list once it goes through another update.
Definitely should be.
And we'll probably do a bonus episode when they do an update to see if any got hit that we have covered.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So that is what I have for casting and awards. Did you have any other little tidbits before we move on to keys?
No, I mean, I think I like the fact that he stayed true to a lot of the languages, a lot of the pronunciations, everything from the because again, you're thrown into each house has their own little secrets and their own little backstories and all this stuff. And plus you've got the Bene Gesserit with their own dialect. You got the Fremen with their own dialect. You got all this stuff and you're just catch up. Hope you get there.
And I love movies that do that. It's just sci-fi epics sometimes take either a history to be familiar with or some in-depth research, which is what I did, because I would have not been able to, I wouldn't have been able to say half these names, and I still can't pronounce them right, obviously, without research. So
but I like the fact that he kept a lot of that, even down to the phrasing from the novel. So like the first thing you see, even before the credits, is you hear the Emperor's language and you see dreams are messages from the deep. I thought that was really cool. And then several times you hear Jessica say, "Fear is the mind killer," which is the big quote from Dune. You must overcome your fear in order to face your destiny, which is a good segue into keys.
Land, Katie Scarlett, land.
It's the only thing that lasts. Dune the novel has influenced so much science fiction and fantasy.
Well,
but
that's,
also,
I mean, if you had to put landmark novels in science fiction out there, I would think it would be in the top 5 for sure.
oh, easily. It's just so influential on everything. But he's taking the typical hero's journey
For sure.
and just telling it with all this embellishment. You already said Game of Thrones. That's the first key I have in this, just because I think it's most topical now. But you've got the houses, you've got essentially the Atreides are the Starks, the Harkonnens are the Boltons. You've got Mentats, which are these teachers that are having their own agenda and everything else, which is very similar to a variation of the Bene Gesserit and the Meisters in Game of Thrones. You got all this internal warfare with people backstabbing and traitors and secrets, and it's just all this political intrigue or clan, to your point, intrigue going on. So very, very similar to Game of Thrones. And obviously highly influenced. George R. R. Martin was highly influenced by Dune.
Okay, I hadn't really considered that, but yeah, he would have read Dune before he wrote those books.
Well, so would that other guy that wrote that science fiction series that now has Adventureland and Disney.
What are you talking about?
George Lucas. People have always said, especially A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, that is Dune.
Oh, I agree. I've got both those specified in my. Well, I'm sure most of my keys are the keys you have because you know more about this genre than I do. But I mean, the first key to me would obviously be the novel, but then you would also have to do the predecessors, which is the Lynch movie that we covered that was just ludicrous to me, and the sci-fi miniseries Dune, which I have not seen, and you said it's very low budget.
Yeah. And I think they did children too. They did 2 miniseries, I think. So they did children
okay.
as well. But, and yeah, going back to influences, I'm sure Herbert might have been influenced by Lord of the Rings, and he might have been influenced by Idols of the King, the whole King Arthurian legend thing of the boy who has to find the sword in the stone and da-da-da. And this one, it's not a sword in a stone, it's a crysknife. But his destiny is foretold by witches and wizards and all of that. So there's a lot of linkage to classic literature in this as well.
I put Le Morte d'Arthur as well.
Yeah, same thing.
I'm more familiar with it than I am Idols. But
yeah, Lord of the Rings has the Bene Gesserit. To me, they're a lot like the elves. The Bene Gesserit in this are a lot like elves in Lord of the Rings. Mm-hmm. They're watching, they're testing, they have their own agenda. They don't want to interfere, but they do interfere all the time. Yeah, kind of thing. So
you mentioned A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. Mm-hmm. I've got them down as Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back because I never use those subtitles. But I have them for specific reasons. The thing that sticks out in my head is Sand People from A New Hope. The Fremen remind me of Sand People. They're less savage, but they exist on a desert planet like Tatooine, and they have their desert culture or whatever you want to call it. But then to move on to Empire Strikes Back, it's because this movie doesn't end. It just stops.
That's why I have to, yeah.
So, I mean, but I mean, you can, like you said, you can see the influence of Dune, the novel, on George Lucas because the films would not have been out yet.
A gifted farm boy who's on a desert planet and has to join a galactic rebellion. Okay. Same story.
Is it a galactic rebellion, though?
Oh, yeah. By next time, they're going to go to war with the Emperor. So
Darth Vader.
Yeah. I've also got one you might not have, which is Apocalypse Now.
No, I
mostly
have that.
because do you have that?
Yeah.
Because Harkonnen, well, first time you see Harkonnen, he's in the bath and he does the whole rub the water on his head thing. And I don't know if Denis said, let's just do that because everybody will recognize it.
He's as big as Brando in it too.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got a big round head.
And it's bald. And I mean, it's just like meeting Kurtz.
Well,
kind of
and
thing.
that's why I have it. I read that Denis specifically wanted to give him an era of mystery like Kurtz in Heart of Darkness.
Mhm.
So that's why I put Apocalypse Now. He was referring to the novel by Conrad. I was referring to the movie like you did.
Mhm. Yep,
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Mhm.
I have Wheel of Time and that entire series because it is heavily influenced by Dune. Again, you've got a farm boy. It's not a desert planet, but you got a farm boy who has this destiny that he doesn't know. A magic witch appears in his neighborhood and tells
Oh,
him
those
that
are
he's got
fun.
a destiny and he has to join with these two other people in order to change the entire world. He has to become the dragon reborn.
I mean,
And
honestly, though, if you get more broad, if you step out of this box and look at it from a long ways away, all of these stories are the hero's journey, the Campbell
yes, of
stuff,
course.
big time. I mean, even Wizard of Oz is the hero's journey, even though Dorothy
Yep.
is the hero and it's a female hero. I mean,
But
all
you
of
end
these
up
movies have that in
having,
common.
to me, it's interesting that you always end up having female influencers. So in this, it's the Bene Gesserit. In Wheel of Time, it's the Aes Sedai. I'm very curious that Lucas didn't make the Jedi female. If he had, it would have really set it up. If Yoda had been female, it would have really set up the whole this female mentor. The elves in Tolkien, even though most of them are male, the biggest one is Galadriel, who's female, and her influence and all that.
Mm.
But
Uh,
and like you said, if you take your out so much even of the modern ones, Matrix, Harry Potter, Aragon, all of
right.
those are the same story.
Very much so. As a matter of fact, I didn't have Matrix, but I did put Wizard of Oz down.
Well, Matrix is Neo and he becomes the Messiah.
Exactly.
Harry Potter, of course, they literally have houses as well, and they're called houses. Slytherin, Gryffindor, all of that. And they each have their own little things. And I have one that I'm sure you have too, but it's that lovely film with the blue people because it is hugely
Avatar.
influenced. Yeah, hugely influenced by Dune. Again, you've got the chosen one, the hero or whatever. He's got to go to an unknown environment with indigenous people who are all rebels trying to fight off the bad guys who are trying to get the most valuable mineral in the galaxy.
Yeah, it's a very, very similar story. And
And
we
I went,
we know
okay.
Cameron's a big sci-fi nut, so you know
Oh,
he read
yeah.
the book.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't have any others other than what you mentioned, like Lord of the Rings or Lawrence of Arabia,
Yeah.
Dr. Zhivago. I do have one other that you probably didn't mention, but I'm sure you're aware of, is the first trailer for this film features a version of Pink Floyd's Eclipse off
Yes.
Dark Side of the Moon. It's been rescored, though, by composer Hans Zimmer,
Yes.
but it's a nod to director Alejandro Jodorowsky's proposed adaptation of Dune in the 1970s, for which he wanted Pink Floyd to do the score. So it's an homage to a production that never happened.
And in production, we didn't really talk about that, but yes, he spent months with these incredibly talented people, including Millet and O'Bannon and H.R. Giger and all these people trying to do a version of Dune. And you can find it. It's a great documentary too on that,
I think you
kind of
talked about it during our
cursed
last Dune.
project.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I remember the trailer going, "Oh my God, it's Pink Floyd in the trailer for Dune."
Yeah, and that music's great. And I guess they just bought the rights to it, and Hans just rescored it because I don't remember it being not them. I thought it was just them.
And I read that he had to record it during the pandemic, so he had to record it through Zoom or different choir people in different studios all over the world.
That's
doing
awesome.
This in different sections to do it. And then the only other last key I've got is, and it's a cheap key and obvious, but I had in my watch notes, I really liked the scene you mentioned with the sandworm because as it's moving away and everything else, everything looks like the ocean. The sand looks like water when it even goes up against the rocks and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And in production, looking into it, Denis said he wanted that. He wanted the sand to look like Caladan's oceans at times. And he told the special effects guys that. And he wanted the sandworms to make people feel like the shark in Jaws. So when we see them at a
like
distance
running on land
and it's approaching, oh my gosh, we've got to.
Actually, you just gave me another key that I can't believe I didn't have, and it's tremors. Them running to get on rocks because of those monsters under the sand in the desert. Yeah, it's not really
Tremors
a desert.
is definitely influenced by Dune.
Yeah,
yes.
Tremors for sure, and I love that movie.
I've watched the first one. I haven't watched the other 6.
I haven't either. The first one's enough. The first one's great.
Yeah.
So, well, I guess that's going to bring us to a close for this. Well, you know what? No, it's not. We're going to give you a little bonus here at the end of this episode. But I do want to sum up that we like Dune. I would say we like it a lot. We would recommend it. It is not on the 1001 list. I have a feeling it will be once that list is updated. And before we sign off, we're going to do a little bit of a season recap for you.
Yeah.
I had to pull out my notes. I don't really have them. Let me go back to a different background. How do you want to do this, David?
I want to do it however you want to do it, Tim. You just do you, boo.
All right. Well, the reason this idea was born is because we used to do this mid-season before Christmas, and it got to be too much of a monster for me to try to talk about all the director multiples when I knew what was coming up in the immediate future. So I said, let's wait and do it at the end of the season. But then David had the idea of let's also talk about some of these films and the attributes of them that we like or that we remember. All right, season 6. If I had to say anything that would make me remember this season, it's the fact that you chose only films that are based on books. And I thought, holy shit, I've got to read a bunch of books. I read 9 of our episodes.
Wow.
I read, some of them were rereads. I read Jurassic Park, The Incredible Shrinking Man, Somewhere in Time, The Exorcist, Sleepy Hollow, Slaughterhouse-Five, Burnt Offerings, Duel, and The Road. Now, 4 other ones I have read multiple times and did not reread, and those were I Am Legend, The Mist, Gerald's Game, and It. So technically, out of 40 films this year, I read 11.
Wow.
That they were based on, the novels.
Yeah.
So
that was my approach. I mean, my overall take on the season is I think it's my favorite season we've done just because, A, there was a lot of literature, so there's a lot of literature influence in what we picked. There's also taking requests from fans and doing those I really liked. And I also liked the reduxes, going back and revisiting one that we've already done a podcast about, but now redoing it for YouTube and diving back into it again and trying different things. I think one of the reduxes, I went back and listened to our original and went, oh my God, I can't believe this is still on the air somewhere in the ethernets. And then the rest of them, I didn't listen to our originals. I just treated it like I was doing the episode again. I don't know if you did the same thing or not.
I did not go back and listen to the originals because I didn't want to realize that I'm repeating the same thing that I said before. I would rather just go into it blind years later. I will say.
And we did how many? We did 5? We did 3? How many did we do that were reduxes?
4.
We did 4 reduxes. Okay.
We do 2 sci-fi and 2 horror, and we're going to do that next season as well. So there's just, this is off track, but I was looking at our Instagram page the other day, which is truly terrible because we hardly ever post anything on it. But I had put the original trailers for some of the first season on there, and I was watching those, and they are so horrible but so funny because you were not doing video. So it's basically me editing myself, responding to you with just weird sound effects and stuff. And you mentioned The Matrix. That was one of the ones I watched. But all those Haunting of Hill Houses are on there, too. And they're not great, but they're fun to go back and look at. All right. Before we get to like favorites and questions and stuff, do you want me to go ahead and do the director multiples?
Yeah, some stats. Yeah, do some.
Okay.
What are our stats, Tim?
All right. Wow. Hang on. Let me close out of these notes. I'm getting too many pieces or too many boxes open. All right. Director multiples as of the end of season 6. Now, I always do this so that we know how many directors actually fall into a genre-specific niche. We've done Christopher Nolan twice. We've done Robert Fuest twice. He did those Fives movies, this Dr. Fives movie. We did Tobe Hooper twice, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Salem's Lot. Now, these are not just this season. This is overall. Josh Whedon, we've done Serenity and The Avengers. I'm not even going to say. I'm just going to just name them. Brian De Palma, James Whale, we've done 2 of his. Luc Besson, David Cronenberg, Danny Boyle, Alfonso Cuarón, Alfred Hitchcock, Jacques Tourneur, Richard Fleischer, the Russo brothers, Don Coscarelli, Sam Raimi, Richard Donner, Ari Aster, Guillermo del Toro, and Paul Verhoeven. The new ones that have jumped into that category of 2 films as of this season are Zack Snyder. We added Dawn of the Dead, the remake. William Friedkin, because we've covered The Exorcist twice now. Tim Burton, because we did Sleepy Hollow and Mars Attacks.
Okay.
Andy Muschietti, we did both It films for Christmas. Fred M. Wilcox, he did Forbidden Planet. We did it again as a redux. Peter Jackson, we've done Lord of the Rings, but we also did King Kong. So we did 2 of his this season. Ty West, we had done House of the Devil, but we have since added X, and I would gladly add Pearl as well. Directors that we've done 3 of are Wes Craven, Terrence Fisher, Nathan Duran, George Miller, Robert Wise, Stanley Kubrick, and Ridley Scott. The directors that have moved into this category as of this film are Jack Arnold, because we did The Incredible Shrinking Man on top of Creature from the Black Lagoon and This Island Earth, and Denis Villeneuve, who we just covered with Dune. We didn't have any directors in the 4s, but 2 jumped into the 4s this season. One is Mike Flanagan, who I suspect will keep his climb, and the other is George Romero, because we did a redux of Night of the Living Dead. So we've now covered 4 Romeros. I think I like seeing Flanagan and Romero next to each other. That's pretty cool.
I'm sure you do.
No directors jumped into the category of 5 films. However, James Cameron remains there because we've done 5 of his. No directors jumped into the category of 6. Oh, no, I take that back. There are no category of 6s with exception of 1, and it is John Carpenter. And the reason he is now 6 is because we did a redux of The Thing this year.
Oh, yeah.
And then our leading contender, as you've always known, is Mr. Spielberg, who jumped into the category of 9 as of the end of this season. We've recovered Minority Report, E.T., Close Encounters, Jaws, Ready Player One, AI, Jurassic Park, Duel, and War of the Worlds. We did 3 of his this season.
Well, they were based on literature. Come on.
Yeah, for sure. Richard Matheson to boot. All right. I have one last category of potential future candidates. These are people that we've recovered once that could easily climb to number 2. The Wachowskis, Jordan Peele, Dario Argento, Alex Garland, Ken Russell, Stuart Gordon, M. Night Shyamalan, I can't say that, Andre Øvredal, David Fincher, Roy Ward Baker, Fritz Lang, Bong Joon-ho, Roger Corman, George Lucas, Robert Eggers, David Lynch, Ryan Johnson, Neil Jordan, Roman Polanski, Douglas Trumbull, Bernard Rose, Nicholas Meyer, Edgar Wright, Clive Barker, Neil Marshall, Terry Gilliam, Todd Browning, Robert Zemeckis. I'm going to keep going. Peter Hyams, Chuck Russell, Jack Shoulder, Kenji Fukasaku, Robert Rodriguez, Sean Byrne, Joe Dante, Matt Reeves, Dan Trachtenberg, Mario Bava, William Castle, Michael Crichton, Frank Darabont, Peter Jackson, Larry Cohen, Dan Curtis, Michael Reeves, Val Guest, and John Favreau.
Thanks so much for that. That's
Well,
every
the reason
director in
I'm
Hollywood.
doing that, the reason I listed them is because there are some movies on season 7 that feature those directors. So I wanted to name them.
Not all of them.
Not all of them.
Okay. That'd be a lot.
All right. So that's my director multiple trivia for the end of this season.
Yeah.
What do you want to say about the season as far as like favorites?
Favorites. That's hard. I think maybe, let me glance at it because I was thinking maybe favorites that hadn't seen, maybe. That's a way to categorize it because a lot of these we had seen before.
Right.
But is there a favorite that you had never seen before? For me, it's a tie between The Road and Block Island Sound. I'd never seen either of those. I'd never even heard of Block Island Sound.
Mm-hmm.
And I really enjoyed that movie. And I probably would have skipped it.
You didn't like it as much when we did it, but you like it in retrospect.
Yeah,
that's
thinking
funny.
back about it and trying to categorize it with a movie you didn't see. Did you like it or didn't you? Because the rest of them I had all seen. I had seen Gerald's Game, Illustrated Man, Slaughterhouse. Everything almost on the list I had seen. There were only like 3 that I had not seen. So categorizing those, 2 of those were The Road and Block Island Sound.
Well, I love The Road. It wasn't my first time, though, neither for the Block Island Sound.
Yeah.
I would say for like a first-time viewing, my favorite would probably be On the Beach. I had never seen that movie, and I liked it a lot.
Yeah, that's a good one. You had never seen Dune?
That's true, and I liked it a lot too. So that would probably be the 2 that I had not seen that I really liked. I had some surprises of movies that I thought I liked and ended up not liking as much.
Okay.
The winners of those would probably be the Dawn of the Dead remake and 30 Days of Night. Because even though they're both really cool in places, their logic is just thrown out the window in both of them.
Interesting. Mine would be 30 Days of Night is up there, but my other one would be The Stuff. I thought The Stuff was a little better than it was, but it wasn't. And
it's not good at all. And I would rank it with movies that were on the list that you didn't want to rewatch, and I would have put The Stuff and Buckaroo Banzai.
Oh yeah, you're not a Buckaroo fan. No.
And some of them, we do like because we visit them nostalgically, even though they're not that great in places. But like Westworld, that's a fun one to go back and watch. Burn Offerings for me is a fun one to go back and watch.
Yeah, not so much me, but Sleepy Hollow would be. I liked it. I enjoyed going back to it. I love the Redux of The Thing just because that's one of my favorite movies of all time. So,
and that was our 200th episode.
Yeah, going back to that one again was fun, and revisiting it and that whole science fiction horror crossover feel to it is always good for me. And then the only others I don't really have a question for it. Did you have a favorite? Like if a whole season, is there one movie you go, hey guys, go listen to it right now because we had, and it could be a silly one that we didn't like even, but is there a favorite that you would say, we did a good episode of that one? That one was really good. And it's hard because I love so many of these this year.
Yeah, I want to say half of one, and that would probably be the first half of King Kong. The original 1933 King Kong. Yeah, love that movie. But we also did, speaking of King Kong, a lot of giant monster movies. We did, only did we start with Jurassic Park, we also did Godzilla. for the first
Mhm.
time, the very original 1954 movie, Honda, as well as King Kong, which, I mean, so those are three giant ones.
I mean, I haven't listened back, but I would say one that we had a lot of fun doing, and I think had a lot of good content and stuff too. It was Illustrated Man. I think because both of us like Bradbury so much, but we really enjoyed. I remember us having fun with that movie.
We appreciated it because it was clear they had no budget. It looked like they were shooting it out in a field. Yeah, I love that movie.
Hey, Bobby, you had a lake on your property? Let's shoot that. Yeah, let's go over there.
As far as theming, we also did another Stephen King Christmas, but this time we took it into the 21st century. Last time we did old films like Carrie, Salem's Lot, and Creepshow.
Oh, yeah.
This time we did The
Mhm.
Mist, Gerald's Game, and It, Chapter 1, Chapter 2.
All
The
three
Mist.
great.
The Mist.
Man.
I mean, The Mist
Always
is great, but all three of those are great. Really, honestly, they are.
And Mrs. Darabont, right? Isn't that
Mrs. Darabont,
Yeah.
Gerald's Game is Mike Flanagan, and It is Andy Muschietti.
We expanded this season, so we did fantasy. We did Lord of the Rings.
That is
Was
something
one.
new.
So that was a new thing about, again, a contributing factor to this season. And we're going to do that more in the future.
We are. As a matter of fact, that those of y'all don't know, but Dennis and I have already finalized the list for season 7. And we're not going to delve in it too heavily, but we are going to do a couple of fantasy films, probably a season, a couple of suspense films that are not necessarily horror, a season, to broaden the aspects of the genre and also to allow us to get some more Alfred Hitchcock in there. There's always,
and we've
gonna be
danced
fun with
around that a little bit in the past. You have mentioned, done a couple where you've mentioned Giallo, which is suspense mystery with a horror element.
That's
think so.
specifically Italian as well.
Yeah. So I think
Yeah.
going into that'll be fun. That'll be an interesting exploration for us next season and going
Yeah.
forward.
And you mentioned we did listener requests this season. We did 3.
Yeah.
We actually have 4 next season, as well
excellent.
as 4 reduxes and 6 double features, which if it's not the most we've ever done, it's tied for the most we've ever done, I think.
So so Tim Funk, Andrew Marler, and Buck Allen, all 3 on my
Mhm.
list. Those were the listener requests we did this year. So thank you for giving those to us. If you're out there listening and watching and want us to do thing, put a request in, let us know. You can leave it in the comments, you can email us, whatever. We'd love to hear.
Yeah. And Buck is such a fanatic that he's actually got one next season as well.
Excellent.
And then we got
that.
3 newcomers as well. So we'll have
Perfect.
4 listener request episodes, and we'll, of course, theme our Christmas episodes as well as our Thanksgiving as well, and Halloween, October. October's always horror.
Yeah, always.
Well, it's
Well,
been
Tim,
a pleasure, David.
I wanted to say that to you. I wanted to be first.
You go then.
No, before you do the close, I just wanted to say thanks. It has been a wild ride. It is always fun every single season. The amount of, there's a lot of work that goes into it and a lot of time, but it's so amazing the things that come out of it. And the fact.
Well, folks, we lost David. He's been having some computer issues that you guys are unaware of this season, and his computer sometimes craps out on him before we complete. And instead of him coming back, we're just going to close with me. We're grateful to have you as viewers and listeners. And let me not get away from here without giving a plug to next season, because David mentioned that this was possibly his favorite season that we've done. But just looking at the list for season 7, I am psyched, because there are a lot of great films on there, and we can't wait to get to you and get back in the swing of things coming next fall. Over the summer, we'll have some bonus episodes for you, so you'll have plenty of outtakes and things like that. And until then, we'll be seeing you out there in those darkened cinema halls. Bye. Don't lose your keys.
can't start the car. Johnny has